Hi everybody. Welcome to the fourth session of Zohar, Illuminating the Book of Radiance. Last week we left off with our first cliffhanger, and it's very exciting to get back into looking at how the Zohar introduces itself. So we're looking at a discrete text called Hakdamat Zohar, which means literally the introduction of the Zohar, which seems like it's its own coherent piece, and that was placed by the editors, by the publishers in the beginning, because they saw in it something essential to what they want you to experience, what they want you to be exposed to as you start your journey into the text of the Zohar. So I want us to pay attention in terms of like, what is the Zohar trying to say to us as we begin our relationship with it? Because that's the role of an introduction. Introductions are often written actually after the book is written. That's the secret if you ever write a book, right? You actually write the introduction afterwards because you're summing up a lot of stuff. You want to make sure after you have a grasp of the whole work, you want to make sure everyone has a good footing in approaching it. So the Hakdama, the introduction, is really about trying to recapitulate something general about the work, not just its first step, but it's trying to anticipate your relationship with it. So that's something to keep on the back burner as we progress, as we begin. We continue beginning. Let me share the screen, as I say in the German. Okay. So everyone see that okay? Groovy. So we saw before the text in which the origin of the very common practice for Shabbos for people to hold a glass of wine in an upturned hand, because you actually make your hand like the green petals that surround the cup of the rose. We actually make our arm into a rose stem, and the glass at the top is like the cup of the petals, and the wine that we sip from it is like sipping nectar, right, from an open flower. It's a beautiful image. It's deeply embodied. It's somatic, but it's also resonating with the state of the Shekhinah. We saw that the Shekhinah is depicted as being a rose amongst thorns, right? A rose in the midst of a thicket of thorns. And that our role is to still find a way to navigate through those prickly bits, right? The sitra achra, the other side, the challenging experiences in life, and still find a way to reconnect and regain unity with the aspect of God in our midst. So that we see the way that the Zohar is not just giving us a history lesson in terms of the history of God's relationship with the world and the history of the Jewish people in exile, but also giving us metaphysics, right? A statement about what the nature of God is like, what the state of God is, and also giving us instructions for ritual. And it unites all three of those aspects in one experience, right? It gives us something to do, it gives us something to think about, and it gives us something to experience. Okay, it gives us a story about ourselves, it gives us a story about God, and it gives us a story that tells us instructions in terms of what to do. All three of those things are happening at the same time. I think simultaneity, right? Something happening at the same time, that synchronicity is key to not just how the Zohar talks, but how the Zohar wants you to start tuning in, right? That multiple things are happening at the same time, and you're tuning into the frequency, and you can move the dial, right? Move the tuner right and left, and actually pick up in the same moment. You actually tune into different aspects of reality, but it's all happening at the same time. All the signals are being broadcast at once. That metaphor might have been a little bit dated. I don't know if people use a tuner anymore, but for us retro people with our stereo systems. So so then we saw the first example in which the Zohar is grounding itself, not just in the way it's introducing itself, but also in the way that the Torah introduces itself, right? So in the beginning, the first word of the Torah, Bereshit, and we see the first Zoharic drush in that. And we left off before we saw the way in which it starts by trying to map on the emergence of God and the emergence of creation, right? As the world becomes itself, so too is God actually coming out of God's shell, coming out of the infinite, and taking on the role of a God you can relate to. Right? There's no God unless there's something else to recognize it. Otherwise, it's just being. right? It's just existence. It's just the infinite without some kind of relation, right? That's like God isn't God yet. As it says in the Talmud, Ein melech below am. There's no king without a nation, right? So one thing we kind of skipped over or just sped through at the end is that the next way that the Zohar tries to map on this primordial story is also onto the ancestors. So it maps on how the Sfirot, right, God's emergent personality, also map onto the Avos, onto the patriarchs, the matriarchs. And it's all mapped onto this pasuk from Shir HaShirim, from the Song of Songs, in which it says, which we saw before, Hanitzanim nir'u ba'aretz et hazamir higia, right? The blossoms have appeared on the earth, and the time for pruning is now. And the pruning, right, to snip away the thorns, snip away, to pull the weeds, to get at what we can relate to, what is beneficial, by clearing a path through what is challenging, through what is painful, through what is difficult. And I said before that there's a famous passage in Sha'arei Ora of Yosef Jikatilia that Psukeit Zimra, the introductory section of davening, is actually seen as that, to snip away the zamir, to prune away these thorns. So I want to move to the next text. I don't want to give that short shrift, but I do want to get to focus on the Rebbe Elazar drush, and then we'll conclude with the way his father, as always, Rashbi, upstages him. So we see Rebbe Elazar start with another drush on Bereshit. He says, Rebbe Elazar patach. Now we have a new pasuk, right? Remember, in the midrashic framing, you open with a verse. That's the word patach here. And it's not just that you open with the verse, but also you start by quoting something what's called a rachok. You quote a verse far away. So Bereshit is the close, right? We're talking about creation, and we're going to start by referencing a verse far away in Isaiah. It says, Se'u marom einechem u're'u mi vara ele. Lift up your eyes to the skies, lift up your eyes on high, and see who created these. Now, if you notice in the translation, I capitalized who and these. And start your brain a-twirling. I'm not going to, no spoilers here, but there's a reason, and it's also something very key that the Zohar, how the Zohar relates to language and how the Zohar relates to Torah. Okay? So, Se'u marom einechem, lift up your eyes on high, la'an atar. Where? Great question, right? Lift up your eyes on high, but to what place? Where are we directing our sight? La'atar dechol ainin talyan le, the place where all eyes hang, where all eyes depend, where all eyes have some kind of relationship. Okay, so before we get into the technical stuff, what does that mean? What do we mean here? When we say lift up your eyes on high and look at who created these, and it says, where are we looking? To the place where all eyes dangle. Just intuitively, I want us to start trusting our reactions. Intuitively, what does that make you think?
Sky.
I'm sorry?
Oh, it's Lauren, looking up to the sky. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, lift up your eyes on high.
Speaker on. Yeah, looking up on high is looking up to the sky.
Okay, why is it the place where all your eyes dangle, where all your eyes depend?
I think because we have the mythology of the sky being heaven.
Okay, so there's
so
a story.
So you're looking up towards heaven, which is up in the sky.
Okay, right. So there's a story we're participating in. We have, in a sense, the sky as this metaphor that we inherit as a place of God's residence. Okay.
Correct.
When I think of where all the eyes hang, I think of the Sfirot, in which the different lights are at different levels.
Okay. All right. Great. Interesting pun here that ayin, right? The word ayin, which means eye, also ma'ayan, which means a well. And that double meaning is very helpful, like Ein Yaakov, right? The well of Jacob. It doesn't mean the eye of Jacob, it means the well of Jacob. So we have this notion also of to Eric's point, the Sfirot as these repositories, these, effusing, suffused fountains of blessing, right? That the Sfirot are also seen as like 7 springs. Okay, great. So why do all of our eyes drift up to the heavens? What kind of experience, right, is this verse evoking from us? What kind of sensibility is the Zohar inducing in us? Okay, something to think about, right? And so we see this actually, that the Zohar draws on this pun, the place where all eyes drift. Uman ihu, and what is that? Right, so I mean, it's also, pay attention to what the Zohar is doing too, right? Petach einayim. Okay, interesting. So there's a place called Petach einayim. This is where the Zohar is like, the Zohar in classic Midrash thing is like, okay, you need to know the Tanakh by heart, and you need to know all of its references. It's the first Wikipedia. You need to know everything, and it's gonna hyperlink to everything, right? So you gotta know your stuff. So it's very reference heavy. But I would say not just because it's like trying to nerd out on you, but because it's doing this classic Midrashic thing of trying to show how all aspects of the Torah are connected to each other. That the Torah shouldn't be read in order, even though it's an introduction. We're going bouncing back and forth, reference, association. The Torah is a fractal. Every part encompasses the whole. Every whole is made of the parts. It's not really a book. It's not a novel that you read in order. The Torah is an experience. The Torah is something that you are simmering inside of. So Petach einayim is the name of a place. It's the village where Tamar, right, the erstwhile spouse of Yehuda, that's where she plied her trade at this place called Petach einayim. But that means the gate of this place called Einayim. Why do you think it's called Einayim? Remember, what's the Ma'ayan? It's a well. So it seems like it's a gate into an oasis where there are a bunch of wells. And what did they call things back then? They gave things descriptive names. It's the gate to the wells. Great. So you got to the gate, and into the gate, there's all these places where you get water. Fine, but Petach einayim also means open your eyes. Right? Like boom. Right? Open your eyes. So you are looking up at the skies. You are dazzled by its brilliance, and it's causing you to open your eyes and let it all in. What is this place? The opening of eyes. But it's not just that your eyes are opening, it's the opening for your eyes. It's the portal for vision. It's the gateway for your sight. So we have this liminal space, this entranceway for you to have this visionary relationship in some way, right, with something beyond. So we see it, it's like it's zinging. But remember I said, like, look at what the Zohar is doing. What is the Zohar insisting on doing? What's Rebbe Elazar insisting on doing? Questions. Right, he starts by saying, lift up your eyes on high and look at who created these. Who is a question word. Me. And then questions. What is that place? What's its name? Why? There you will realize that the concealed ancient one existing for questioning created these. Okay. So this is what the Zohar does. It is, what is it? It's an enigma wrapped in a mystery, tucked within a secret. It is elusive. It is unclear when it's, what it's even referring to all the time. You got to know how to tune your ear to its code words. But in a lot of ways, I think it's not right just to reduce it to get an answer. It's not about getting an answer. It's not about decoding it. It's about being in the mystery. Okay, so, but we have some important terms here. So Atika Kadisha is a term that's used elsewhere in Zoharic literature to refer to an aspect of Ein Sof, an aspect of Keter, or an aspect of the infinite. Atika Kadisha means the holy ancient one, except here's something very important. Bina is actually more like Keter or Ein Sof than Chochma is. If you remember, Chokhmah comes before Bina. So you might think, oh, Chokhmah actually should be closer to Keter. But no, because just as Keter is the nexus between the infinite of Ein Sof and the Sphirot, right? It's that point of contact. It's that bridge. Bina is also a point of contact. It is an access point. So this is our first kind of maybe in-depth introduction to a sphira. This verse is basically a paean, P-A-E-A-N, like a rhapsodic ode to Bina by Rabbi Elazar. Why Bina? Well, that gets into why actually I fell in love with the Zohar. Bina is, so if maybe, you know, what I can do is share a different screen just to maybe refresh our memories when it comes to the Sphirot. So let me open that really quickly. Nope. Doop. Great. Oh no. Okay. Okay. So, can everyone see that? Nope. So, right, Keter, if you see, Keter has this opening on top. That's the way it's represented. And the reason it's a non-complete circle is because it is fed into by Ein Sof. Right? It is it's like, imagine a balloon, right? And a balloon is full of water. Let's say it's a water balloon, but it's really full. Keter is the stretched out rubber. That's the boundary between all of the world around and the water inside. Right? Keter is the thinnest layer that is the separation between the wide world and what's contained. So Keter is that point of contact. Keter partakes of the infinite, but on the other hand is also definite. It's also defined. The reason Bina is more like Keter, as we'll see, is because Bina is also a connecting point. It's a connecting point to all of the rest of the Sphirot. So Keter is the connection with Ein Sof. Chokhmah is the spark, right? It's like you turn the key in the engine, vroom, okay? It sets off a chain reaction. Bina is called the Ma'ayan. She is called the well. She is called the Great Sea. She is called the Upper Mother. You can think of Bina as a cosmic womb. It's the space in which everything is gestating. It births the rest of the Sphirot. It is the nexus point with the rest. So there's a separation between the 7 lower Sphirot and the top 3. So Bina is that connecting, that nexus, that node, right? The origin, where you came from, but where, if you imagine going back to it, you are undone, right? Like being unborn. Imagine, you know, like the oceanic feeling that Freud talks about, right? That of a fetus in the womb, of not being separate from what you're surrounded by because you're still inchoate, right? You're still not fully formed. You're not separated yet. You're not discrete. You're not an individual. You're part of the system. To be born means to be born into being an individual, to be separated out, right? Cut the umbilical cord. But to be in the ocean, to be in the womb, right? Still to be in the source. So Bina is like Keter in the sense that it is in connection with this diffuse, oceanic infinite, right? You are, to be in that space is to be in the all. Okay. So just I want to make sure that we know what Rabbi Elazar is gesturing to. So even though Atika Kadisha is normally in reference to Keter or Ein Sof, here, Atika actually refers to Bina. That Bina is seen as more likened unto the Ein Sof than Chokhmah, its masculine partner, because imagine what the womb is like to the fetus. It's infinite, because there's no separation between it and what it's surrounded by. That's what infinity is. It's the all. Okay? So Atika de Kaimash Lishaela. It's satim. It is concealed. It is a mystery, right? It is the boundary. When you're born into knowing, right? What does it mean what does it mean to grow? To grow as a person means to establish your senses, to establish your faculties of knowledge, to be able to interpret the world and make it make sense. But when you're in the womb, there's no world that's separate from you. So you can't know the world. You are the world. The world is you. That's, again, that oceanic feeling of the infinite. A return to the source, to be before you're born. So it is before questions, or it stands at the opening of questions, petach einayim. It's where questions start. Why? Well, who here has had a 3-year-old? Who here has had a 2-year-old? Right? So when do the questions start? Has anyone ever seen, okay, I haven't had kids, but has anyone ever seen the TV show Animaniacs? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, there's a character called Mindy. Mindy and Buttons. Her dog's called Buttons. And Mindy is this little and cherubic blonde girl. And then, she meets somebody and just everything out of her mouth is just the question why. Right? So she's on an airplane and she's just like, why? 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 Because what are questions? Right? Questions are your grasping into something you don't know. Right? Questions are you posing, like interrogating, trying to form a relationship, trying to get your footing with something that you don't have knowledge about yet. Right? You're forming a relationship with the unknown. That's what a question is. It's not a statement, it's not a claim, but it's starting to build something, starting to build that interface. Okay, so Bina, again, as the origin of our coming into our own. Bina as the nexus of what precedes us, of the infinite. The womb, the source, is the opening into a world. And what does it mean to open into a world? It means to ask a question. Who are you? What is this? Why am I? It's living. Now you're born into life. And then to interface with life is to ask questions. Okay. So, and there you come to realize that the mysterious, concealed ancient one who stands prior to questions, as a source of questions, open to questions, created these. Bara Eila. So wait a second. Let's go back to our verse. Se'umarom einechem, lift up your eyes on high. That's Pashut Pshat, fine. And see who created these. Who's the subject of the verse? But Josh, what are you talking about? It's what's it called? It's an apostrophe. It's command. Lift up your eyes on high, you addressed but unnamed person, and see who created these. Oh no. Who's the new verse? Who's the new subject of the verse? This I'm not telling you. This you got to figure out. It becomes a description, not just an apostrophe. Well, okay, so we have the predicate, right? Bara Eila, created these. And we all for this for a certain aspect of our class, we all diagrammed sentences when we were younger, right? So there's the subject and there's the predicate. Okay, great. So this is the verb, this is the object. Where's the subject? It usually comes right before the predicate, doesn't it? So what's the subject? Every week I have to say this. Grammar is mysticism. So what's the subject? Who
The
does
subject is, it's me. Who?
Yes! Yes, you got it. Good. Yes, it's me. What? Yes. Because, well, first of all, in English, this is actually, it's simpler in English. Because the word who is a pronoun. Right? The word who is a pronoun. It can function as a subject. Right? I am Josh, the one who da 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 da. Right? So that is me referring to myself with the word who. Fine. But here, the word me, we have revealed as a code word. A code word for whom or for what? For what? Well, give me the answer. I'm not gonna tell. I mean, it's the concealed ancient one. Who created these? It's me. Well, not me. Like, it's the Hebrew word me. It's the Hebrew word who. But which sphera is it? Renee got it. What's the sphere we were just talking about?
We were just talking about Bina.
Yeah, that's me. So whenever you see, this is why the Zohar is just chock full. This is why Zohar is chock full of these allusions, of these codes, of these associations, references. It makes everything happen at the same time. That's how Zoharic language works. So on one hand saying, lift up your eyes on high and see who it was that created these. And that is a generic term. Who was it? And the answer is, oh, it's God. But now instead of being a question, who was it? Now it's an answer. It's who that created these. Me becomes the subject. Now, we know that me is Bina for a number of reasons. One, because it's referred to here. But the second one is that also Bina is associated with Yom Kippur. It's associated with the 50 gates of Tshuva. 50 gates of Tshuva, you say, Joshua? Why, yes, indeed. It's associated with Yovel. Yovel, isn't that the 50th year in the cycle of Shemitah? Why, it is. But Josh, what if you add the letters Mem and Yud together in Gematria? What number do you get? Well, you also get 50. Now, again, I'm not going to make like a strong claim like, oh, it's a Bible code or something like that. But it's so elegant. It's gorgeous because it all fits together. It fits together beautifully. That Bina, as the source from which we all draw, as that which is the unifying creative feature of God that birthed the world into existence, is also that love that we reach back for when we ask for forgiveness. Doesn't that make sense, actually, in an intuitive way? That the source, the womb-like source that we come from, the well that nourished us all, is also the resource we draw from when it comes to the love of tshuva, of returning to your original presence, of returning to your original source, returning to your original vision of yourself. And that is also associated with Yom Kippur, that absolution, that sense of complete forgiveness. All of these things are in Yovel, the cathartic freedom, right, in which all slaves are set free and all property, all property claims are annulled. Dror Yikra, right, that let liberation be decreed throughout the land. All of this is linked, is conceptually linked, and this is the way that these Zoharic terms work. So the Zohar, because it is not just a book of secrets, it is a secret book of secrets. It is not just going to give you the answer and say, oh, P.S., it's Bina. Because the point is that it is about drawing these associative connections. It is about drawing you into its web, into this network of connections. It's not about decoding it for you. It's about making you attuned to the mystery. So there you will realize that is the concealed ancient one who stands prior to question, who created these. Who is it? Me. And when you see that little chupchik, that is when the Zohar is trying to turn something into a noun. It makes it a name. It names the mystery, but it doesn't solve the mystery. It just makes it the mystery that acts. Me, the question that works, the question at the source of all things. Hahud ikre mikze hashamayim le'ela, the one that is called the boundary of the heavens above, because it's the boundary of our phenomenal existence. Phenomenal in the sense like the world of experience, right? Again, Bina as that liminal space, that boundary space, before which you're in the origin, after which you're in the world. So it is the boundary, right? Bina as the limit. You can pose questions to Bina, as we're about to see, but you can't get answers. Answers are in the world. You find answers in the world. Bina births questions. De kola kaima birshute, everything exists in her domain, by her permission. The al de kaima l'she'ela, the ihu ba'orach satim, that word we should be familiar with by now, velo itgalia. It can be questioned. It's open to questions. It's liable to be questioned, but is a path concealed, not revealed. Remember that orach versus derech? There's a reason we did that. Bina is the orach. It is the mysterious way that is just on the precipice of being made. It's the path in being formed. It's the entering into the world. It's never done. It's a path that is opened anew. Something new is being born. That's Bina. That's me. Ikre me. It's called me. It's called who? Right? What is the pronoun who? The pronoun who is undefined. It's just that there is someone, but can't be named, can't be solved, can't be pinned down. Who is the opening of questions? You ask who to start to figure out who it is, but it's the beginning of that. It's not the solution to it. Who is the mystery personified? Deha le'ela late taman shaila, because above her there are no questions. So she is the source of questions. And I mean, think of it, if you can imagine the sphere out in your head again, right? If you go up the chain, the great chain of being, beyond Bina, there's no questioning, because there's not even a world yet. You're not separate from this formless tohu vavohu, right? Void and matter. Bina is above Bina. It's all inchoate. It's the fetus in the womb. It's the fetus in gestative development. But Bina is birth. Bina brings you into the world. And once you're in the world, you grasp around trying to figure out what's separate from you. All right, early childhood development, right, is learning that you are not the extension of you is not the world, that there is a world separate from you. And you learning that is your individuation. You're becoming separate. You're becoming an individual. And how do you do that? Through questions. By grasping the mystery. But by grasp, we don't mean to solve. We mean to literally start sticking out your hands, feeling around, trying to get a sense of where you're at. That's what it means to live in question. Okay. Right, in this liminal heaven, this limit of heaven, this end of heaven, is called me. Pause. Thoughts? Clarification questions? Insights? Ideas? Objections?
I'm a little lost with that last sentence.
No, we're just getting into it. That's an introductory sentence.
Oh, okay.
Every word in Zohar, not every word, some words are helper words, but many, many, many words in Zohar are saying many things at the same time. That's what I mean in terms of it is a hermeneutics of simultaneity. It is a text that is speaking many things at once. It's not just, you watch a movie and you read a review to figure out what the movie means. And the Zohar is trying to push back on that kind of simplifying, reductive relationship to art, relationship to poetry, right? That good poetry is good because it's not solved. It's not solvable. It's as complex as life is. The Zohar is as many faceted as the Torah is, right? And the Torah, well, what's revelation? Revelation is that God can say two things at the same time, but we hear one. So the Zohar is trying to repeat a revelatory experience every time you read it, because it's trying to say many things at the same time. It's trying to overload you with meaning. It's like a cup runneth over. Every word is over-determined, right? Every word has so many meanings in it that you can't stop making links, making connections. Right? Me, as the unifying source, creates these, and these is the beginning of the plural. Right? We go from the single source of me into the world of many things. Right? Like it's happening at the most basic grammatical semantic layer. Mystery, revelation, something coming out of the depths. Okay. So the limit of heaven, and it's worth noting Shemayim is also a code word for Tiferet, but we're not going to get into that, is called me. It's the limit, right? Again, it is the limit of your experience. Dianetics and L. Ron Hubbard's Scientology will try to get you to remember it, before you were born. But I think we can generally agree it's after you're born that your memory starts, right? That you remember your experiences, your sense memory, and things like that start after you're born. So being born, Bina, is the limit of what you can know. And there's no questions before it. V'it achara latata v'ikrema. So there's me, that's Bina, and then there's ma, which means what. So we're moving from who to what. Okay? What is associated with Tiferet? Why? Well, we're moving from who, right? The question that tries to establish that there is a presence, that there is a person, right? There's a potential relationship, into the world of what. And what is the world of things, right? What, right? Whatness. In Greek, it's called quiddity. In Hebrew, it's called mahut, right? Whatness in Hebrew, mahut, literally means essence. It means thingness. It means existence. So we're moving from who, which is a question that's only a question, to what, that is a question which is also an answer. Because what is a thing? It's the solidifying of the world. In what there are answers, not just questions. Right? What is that? Well, you can grab it. What is that? That's not just a question. What is that? It's an answer. What is that? Eila, hu, ma. Ma and Eila. Right? These. What is the world of these? These is what you do when you refer to things. Those. These. The world of thisness. What is, I mean, that's what actually in grammar is called an indexical word. Indexical means what's, well, show me your index finger. Point at something. Great, that's a thing. Indexical means you can point to it. It literally means you can point to it. So an indexical word is that, this, these, because those words can only refer to things. Use the word these and don't refer, wait, use the word this and don't refer to a thing. Try, wait, try. Even the question, what is this, implies a thing. So what is always a question that has to do with these. Who, though, is the opening of questions. Who is the first?
I have a
Thoughts are also things. Thoughts are also things, Susie, but that was a very good challenge.
I think that when you ask the question what, you're already applying thingness to whatever the object was, whether it had it or not before.
Yeah, great. Exactly. It solidifies, right? What is something that thingifies? Right? So once we're in the world of what, we're in this world, we're in the world, right? The world as an arrangement of things. Who is our starting to get a grasp on whether I'm even here or not. But what, we're already on surer footing. So we're moving from more abstract, the world of only questions, the limits of all questions, right? In a sense, also the beginning of a questioner. Who is the one that is asking, right? Who is the birth of the questioning? What is the birth of what's being questioned? Ma bein hai lahai, what are between these? The former is concealed, called who, and exists in question. That's Bina. And when a person asks and inquires, peering in, petach einayim, right, the opening of seeing, peering in to realize from one dimension to another, to the extent of all dimensions. Now, why that? Le'istakla ulaminda midarga lidarga. So darga is like the word madrega, which you might have heard before in your travels. It literally means like a rung of a ladder or a stair. Okay? A grade, if you think of it like grading a hill, right? Like like gradations. Like a grade, like but think of it like a grade like in school. You're getting older. You get to grade 2, then grade 3, then grade 4. Right? So higher and higher grades. Or like a Michelin star, right? You're like getting graded on a test. You're getting graded. Higher and higher levels, okay? But look at the way that it works. Midarga lidarga ad sof kol hadargin. From level to level, from aspect to aspect, until the end of all aspects. So it's a common notion in Bina that we saw, funny enough, actually, if you remember from the Parsha chat this past Thursday, Bina is lahavin davar mitoch davar. Its understanding is to extract one, and to infer one thing from another. So what kind of knowing is Bina? Or rather, what kind of knowing does questioning support? It's a relational kind of knowing. It's figuring out one thing from another. It's a knowledge based in growth. It's a knowledge that builds on itself. To ask a question is to open yourself into new frontiers, which then positions you to grow as you learn. Questioning is learning, is growth. And it's only done through building a successive or progressive relationship with that which you're questioning. To zoom out for a quick second, I know we're like, and this is, oof, we're telling so many stories now, but they're all stories of growth. it says a lot about what world you're in, what metaphors you use to understand what the world is like. The 18th century was the beginning of a mechanical metaphor of the world, right? The famous metaphor of if you find what's it called, a pocket watch on the heath, right? You say, there must be a clockmaker. But think about that metaphor. What is the world like? It's like a machine. It's like a machine, right? So think about what the world is like. It's inorganic. What you put in, you get out, right? And it's 18th century, beginning of this, after the scientific revolution, heading into the industrial revolution, right? So machines, there's the main framework that we're thinking with. But the Zohar has a deeply organic understanding of the world and of how to understand ourselves, even organismic, that the world is an organism that's gestating, it's being born, it's growing, it's developing. Remember I said before, early childhood psychology development is a useful tool to apply here. The world is being born. You are being born. You are growing and developing. You're growing into the world as the world also grows. But it's not just that, but God, Kivyachol, is described here in metaphor as growing, as being born. Now again, it's not saying that God is being created. It's something very different. But God is growing into God's role, into God's relational role, into God's place or position. And that's true, right? That isn't it the case that as we grow, as we get older, as we develop as people, the world also, in a sense, becomes more complex? Right? Because we're only able to realize the complexity of the world as we develop the tools to make that realization. So there is this parallelism. We grow into the world as the world grows into us. God grows into God's role as divine, right, as deity, as we develop and can receive God. There's only shefa, there's only flow, there's only giving if there is a kli, a vessel to receive. So there's always this partnership, this unity, but this dialogical unity of the way that this works. A lot of different stories are being told. So yeah, Susie just asked, as in our perception of God, and this is where I think, in a sense, there's a slightly more radical story than just the idealistic framing of how we think about God develops. Right? You say, okay, so as you get older, you develop more complex metaphors, theological terms. You have experiences, or like, things are not simple, things are more complicated. Fine. But I think that there's actually, in a sense, like just as this is something is happening that's stirring here down below, iteruta dilatata, right? The arousal, the growing below, the awakening below. There's also an iteruta dilaela. There's also an awakening above. That God is depicted as developing, right? That's what the Sphirot are, right? The Sphirot is a growth from the infinite into a persona. So God is actually extending God's self and developing the different facets or aspects of the ways for us to interface, the way for us to relate. So it's not just that we're projecting ideas or more complex ideas onto an unaffected God, but God is depicted as dynamic, as emerging, as reaching out, right? That God is equally extending God's self, growing and developing in this kind of way. Now, it's into language, so here it gets tricky, but yes, a lot of different stories are being told at the same time here. One is a psychic story, right? A story of how our minds develop, how we how we relate with reality. a metaphysical story, right, as the divine develops, a physical story, a story about how the created world develops, and also a theological story in terms of developing tools and metaphors to understand that relationship between us and God. So me is drawing one thing from another because questioning is a mode of knowledge that is based in relationship. It is based in growth, right? Building one thing on top of another, learning one thing from another, the dialogue we have inside of us, the way that we learn from other people and we are grateful to them and we incorporate their wisdom into us and we grow because of that. That's what questioning is, right? Questioning is reaching into an unknown. And then that is what that's growth. Literally your body as it grows, right? Reaches it into an unknown. You're getting bigger. So growth is getting bigger, but here it means your reach is extending, your capacity is extending, but through humility, through questions. And when you reach, and it goes to the end of questions, right? At some point, questions are exhausted. Ma yadata, what is then reached? What is then realized? Ma istakalta, ma pishpashta, right? Ma here, again, is both the word what, the question word what, but also the object. What is it that you have known, that you have come to know? What is it that you have investigated? Ma istakalta. Ma pishpashta. What is it that you have interrogated? What is it that you have picked apart? Hakola satim kidikadmita. All is actually still mysterious as it was before. The end of questions ends up bringing you back to questions. There's no end to this. I don't know if you thought that this was like, oh, I'm getting the secret code word. I'm going to figure out all the mysteries. No. Because I think anyone who has done like advanced study in anything knows that the point isn't that you're aiming for absolute knowledge. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Right? The best scholars in the world are wise, not in their actual containing of knowledge, but in the extent to which they realize what is beyond their capacity for knowledge. The more you know that you don't know, that's wisdom. Imagine someone thinking they can know it all. Right? Arrogance and wisdom, there's not room one for another. Right? Arrogance is actually what displaces the Shekhinah from the world, says the Talmud. So is anger. They both do. Anger also means you can't learn. Okay.
So Josh, basically,
ouch.
you will get, but basically you are going to get to a point where you just have to accept. You can keep asking questions and then just keep finding out, like, well, we're back to the beginning again. And then, like, if that's the cycle, the circle, then you have to just come to a point where you say, that's it. I just accept.
So
accept it all.
So I think, I think there are a couple ways to respond to this, right? I think everyone reaches a breaking point. Like imagine going deeply into something, like deeply into a question that you're asking. And then the end result of that investigation, of that inquiry, is realizing the extent of what you can know. Is it that you're back at point zero? Or actually have you gone all the way to the end of the path? I think the letters kid-di are really important here. That means ki'ilu in Hebrew. Kid-di in Aramaic means ki'ilu. It's as if you're in the beginning, but you're not. You've grown. There's a very different kind of ignorance that a baby has than a scholar. There's a wise ignorance, or maybe there's a wise agnosticism, right? A wise not knowing versus a pre-knowing not knowing. I don't think this is not against investigation. This, if anything, is an ode to questions. This is a devotion to questions. But the truth is that answers, to think that the result of a question is an answer means you've actually made a mistake. The result of a good question are better questions. There's no end to questioning until the end of questions.
When they asked Feynman, who won a Nobel Prize, why he won what it was that was a Nobel Prize, he again led him to that. He said, well, it was my mother, because the other mothers would ask, what did you learn today? And my mother would ask, did you ask a good question?
I think, yeah, that's a good mushel, Eric. I think people who have worked in education, but not just, and I include all people who have worked in education, whether in a classroom or in a home, right? As a parent or as a friend, a mentor, right? All of us in some ways have been teachers, right? Who is wise? Someone who learns from every person. Everyone is potentially a teacher. And I think you're able to recognize the brilliance of the one that you're learning with or learning from, or the one that you're teaching, by the quality of their questions, right? You can hear a question that's actually trying to steer away from something. And then there's a question that's trying to steer into it, right? Asking a good question means you get it, because you get what there is to ask. So Bina is this actually revelatory and revolutionary upending of epistemology, right? Of the science of knowledge, because it actually undercuts the notion that the point of questions is to be solved, and instead says questioning is an activity, it's a dynamic, and it's growth, because it's you growing as a questioner. Bina is not just an event that happened. You weren't just born once. You're born all the time. Because as you change, you're like new. Bina is a resource we draw on as we change and we grow. As you grow, it's like being born again. So questioning is not something that ends, but it's something that develops. Right? So it doesn't just return you to the beginning. It's as if you're in the beginning, in the sense that you have a whole new beginning in front of you. Right? It's not a return to point zero. It's a propulsion into a further frontier, into the infinite, into the ever-receding horizon of what can be questioned.
I guess what's confusing me is this last little sentence, all is concealed as before. So it seems like if it's going to stay concealed, even though you keep asking and asking and asking and digging, like, it's going to stay concealed. That's what I'm having a problem with.
Can I suggest something?
Please. Yes.
So, but if it says all is concealed as before, maybe it's implying that it was never concealed at all. I don't know. Just a thought.
No, that's, yeah. No, that's a really interesting idea. So maybe concealment is a story that we're telling.
Yeah.
Or it's a way that we're relating to something.
Yeah, because it's something that you've sort of said all along, that it's about us being, or choosing to open up and see what's there. And like Moses noticed things that maybe you wouldn't have other people just walk by because, oh, the bush is always burning, right? But it's up to us to notice that it's there. So it was never concealed. It's just we're concealing it from ourselves.
Right. I mean, so one of the things, right, is also that, like, I don't want us to take my English translations too seriously, in the sense that, you know, it's impossible to translate the Zohar. It really, really is. So satim, right, as a word, does it mean the same things that the English word concealed means? They're related for sure, but, like, I don't want us to get hung up, in a sense, on the choices I've made. I am stupid. But rather, I think let's try to figure out how we're reacting to the things, right, and try to use that as a springboard. So the question, quite rightly, that Renee is posing is I mean, you know, are you doing anything when you're asking something? Or in a sense, what are you doing is that you're realizing like the ultimate futility of it all. So what's the point? And Susie is saying, maybe actually the point is a shift in perspective. And then maybe the point is that, so like, satim implies that there's something that, again, the word concealed means it's shut off, but I think that's like, I don't think that's actually good for the Hebrew. The Hebrew of satim is that it's just that it's not transparent, right? That it's not just like exhaustible, that that there's a mystery, that there's still a question to be asked, that there's still something new to explore. So exactly, so questioning is not an admitting of ignorance, or I mean, it's not a failure of knowledge. It is a growth of the knower, of the through question. Question is the approach into what is not yet known. And that approach, that journey into the unknown, doesn't end. Because as long as the unknown exists, it's not known. You can't ever tell a secret. Because once you tell it, it's not a secret. There always has to be a mystery. There has to be a mystery because, I mean, the way that they're framing it is that Bina is the beginning of questions, and above Bina, prior to Bina, there's no questions at all. So it's like, imagine heading off, right? Like the Mars explorer, right? Heading off into deep space. And you're disoriented, right? There's no horizon. There's no gravity. All there is exploration. All there is an ever receding blackness of what's yet to be discovered. So it's questioned as a heroic gesture because it is a devotion of yourself into a task with no end. It's quixotic, but I don't think it's not in a way that I think is like an evidence of failure. It's quixotic in the sense that that's actually immense courage. To devote yourself to something that can never be finished. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. Right? It's not on you to finish the task because the task cannot be finished. Velo ata ben chorin, right? But you're not free to desist from it. Lihibatel mimena. Questioning is a life's work. So the thing is, you return to the beginning as you were in the beginning. But I don't think it's to say that it negates all the growth, but rather, what does it mean to be at that beginning? It means you have a new beginning. And remember the first word of this drush. What's the first word? Breshit. This is a Torah in the beginning of the Zohar about beginnings. This is actually a Torah about how life is a never-ending stream of beginnings. Beginnings without end. And me is the gateway into beginning. You're always beginning. I really love that you made us like dwell on this word kamita, Renee. Because it does pose this potential hopelessness of okay, so once you realize that that ultimately you can't know, then a conclusion you can draw from that is it's actually better for me not to try, because trying is inaccurate, trying is arrogant. But I don't think that's what it's getting at, because it's kadmita. It's as when you were in the beginning. But something that's as if is not the same as it being that. When you say it's like I'm a newborn babe, you're not saying I'm literally a baby. You're now becoming a metaphor. You're becoming a mushal, right? You are now drawing on language as a way to understand where you're at, to describe it, to open up a new vantage point, a new a new venue, like a whole new direction in your life. It's a whole new frontier that's open before you, and that's exciting because then there's more to explore. All right, from the chat, lots of chat happening. Chat. Ooh, all right, I'm gonna let the chat because unless someone wants to try to summarize. But that's great. It's great thinking. It's just not easy for me to quickly repeat here. But yeah, please encourage. I definitely want to encourage. Please take a look at the chat. There's good Perush happening. There's good Rashi. There's good Tosfos happening on here. And please, if you feel comfortable, please share your insights. Okay, and I think this verse that they're about to quote from Eicha helps to actually hammer home this point in a way. It says the Al-Raza Dina Kativ, and on this mystery, right? Life is a mystery. Everyone must stand alone. Al-Raza Dina Kativ, right? And on this mystery, it is written, Ma Aidach, Ma Adam Elach. Now again, our Zohar antenna are pinging because, oh, ma, it's not just the word what. Now, actually, we're referring to Tiferet. We're referring to this world. We're referring to the worldliness of things. Fine. But ma aidech, to what can I testify of you? In other words, what resources do I have to understand this existence, to understand the divine within it, to understand God? Ma Adam Elach, what can I use as metaphor? To what can I compare you? That's what it literally means. But dimayon in Hebrew also means imagination, because imagination is using your mind to make comparisons between an idea and a thing and an image. So what metaphors can I use to understand something that I can never fully grasp? That's what metaphor is. And we see actually that questions are at the heart of all thinking. Why? Because mystery is at the heart of all theories. I'll explain what I mean. The only way we have to understand things is through language, right? That's how we articulate our theories of the world, right? We make statements, we make claims. But all language is using a tool and applying it to a world that's beyond it, right? We say the word table and it refers to a table in our minds, but it's going to refer to a different table in somebody else's mind. Or we try to use language to describe experiences we've had or a state of mind that we're in or something like that. But language is always going to come up short because the world is independent of it, is bigger than it, more complex than it. So language is amazing because it always shows you the edges of its being applied. In other words, it always says something and also says what it's not. Language is amazing because it fails, because there's always something beyond it, what it's trying to describe. What? Ma. Ma is beyond what it can be compared to. You can't, right? We all know this, right? In the sense that describing, like, you can describe falling in love, but you can't communicate it. How does poetry describe falling in love? By pointing to what's between the words, not by thinking, oh, if I can only find the right word, it will translate love to the world. Right? It evokes something in us, but that evoking is in the absence. It's in what's between. It's the white fire between the black fire of the letters. The question, what is experience, is a very big question. Philosophers of language and things like that too. I'm drawing on a more poetic theory of language. That language is, in a sense, essentially metaphor. that we are always trying to find a tool of best fit to describe a world which always exceeds it. But what's incredible then about language is that you can see the edges of it. You see what it doesn't, what it's not able to do. So in other words, mystery is at the heart of all description. Mystery is at the heart of all, not just asking, but also even of telling. So again, back to Renee's insistence, but I also like referring to I think this really great discussion happening in the chat in terms of the relationship of language and experience, is that it's as if it's before, in the sense that even answering questions generates questions. Failure is good. Failure is amazing, because what failure is showing that there's something more, that there's something else, that it can't be fully contained. It's always excessive. The infinite can't be domesticated. Okay. So we're heading up on our, I mean, again, you know, you can't, oh my, it's every line, there's hours. But I want to get to where we see the interchange between Rabbi Elazar and Rashbi. So Rashbi, if we remember, is Rabbi Elazar's son. And Rashbi is, again, like the main character of the Zohar, so he often gets the last word because he's the most advanced of the visionary scholars. But to a quick point to the chat, right? Arts and sciences, in the sense that I think that's really what it's trying to get at, is that all, I'm not going to say regimes of knowledge, because that's such like a colonialist, imperialist idea, that knowledge is about solving the questions, organizing the data, knowing it all, right? It's a very like militaristic metaphor for how we think about knowing. Whereas the Zohar is a much more gentle theory of knowledge, because it's one that's always in partnership with question. That knowing and thinking is always about birthing new questions. That there's never an end to it. So to treat knowledge as something that can be exhausted or complete is actually missing its heart, which is the mystery. So Rabbi Shimon intervenes and says, okay, I'm going to stop you there in good Kanye fashion, and says, Elazar bini, pesok milach vitgale satima deraza ilah, divnei alma lo yadin. Really classic Zoharic introduction. Says, Elazar, shut up. No, Elazar, cease your words, and I will, and a secret matter, a concealed mystery will be revealed, that the people of the world have never before known. Whoa. Shtik, Rabbi Elazar. And Rabbi Elazar was silent. Silence not as failure, silence as opening for revelation. Is what the Chassidim refer to as the Shtumr Aleph, right? The silent Aleph. The silent Aleph, which is the beginning of all Torah, because Anochi is the first commandment. Anochi begins the silent letter. Silence is the bed. It's the space in which all words and all knowledge exist. Bacha Rabbi Shimon v'ka'im riga chada. We've seen this before, right? That as a beginning, as a prelude, as a preface to revelation, we see the body begin to reveal itself. As the tears are squeezed out of the eyes, our body oozes, in a sense, just as the secrets are about to emerge, right? Something that we cannot contain comes out of us, right? Tears. So Rabbi Shimon is overwhelmed, cries, which is this pre-revelatory act. And he was quiet for a moment. So they're communing in silence. Rabbi Shimon says, Elazar, what are these? I want you to just imagine what this moment would have been like, right? Elazar, my eile. Remember, my, which means what? So ma eile. I tema kochvaya umazale. If you say, oh, look up to the heavens and look and see who created these. These obviously are the stars and the constellations. What have you done? You've confused the pointing with the question. Yes. If you're looking for an answer, sure, you found the right answer. Look up to the heavens, see who created these. Those sure look like stars. End of Pasuk. Good job. But what a way to live would that be, right? What a way to live would that be would be ignoring both, let's say, from the arts and the sciences perspective, looking up at the heavens that the poet does or that Van Gogh did, right? And seeing not just literally dots in the sky or whatever, but seeing what they feel like, what they do to you, what they mean. And for sciences, right, looking at an astronomer or an astrophysicist looking at the stars and being able through them to see the origins of creation, how, Carl Sagan said, we're all star stuff, right? Looking at the stars as something that leads to further knowledge, leads to further questions, that starts you on a new journey. Looking at something for what it means, not just as a way to cease asking. Ha is hazan taman tadir. They've been there forever. No big answer there, buddy. Uvema itbariu kamada at amer bidvar shem shemaim na'asu. They were created with what? By what? Ma, again, as the Ele, as it was said, with the word of God, the heavens were created. I al milin sitimin la lichtov Ele daha itgalya ihu. If it referred to a concealed matter, Torah would not have used the word Ele. Aho, referring to something manifest. So before I kind of had like a nasty reading of Ele, like, oh, me is amazing. Me is opening the question. Even yourself is a mystery. Who am I? I don't know. What? These? Oh, it's the beginning of things. Blech, who needs? But what does it mean to point? What does it mean to have this indexical, indicative word of these? It's the beginning of a relationship. It's a gesture to something new, right? To point and say these means that you're beginning to draw your attention to something else. So these is not actually the end of the question. These is pursuing the question, continuing the question, seeing the question at the heart of all. This mystery was only revealed when I was at the shore. So he goes to the beach, and who comes and reveals himself to him? Eliyahu Hanavi. So this is what's called Gilui Eliyahu. Rashbi gets it straight from the source, baby. It says, Rabbi, do you know who created these? Mi vara Ele means? I said to him, the heavens, right? It's the sky. And the angels, the stars, right? And stars are beautiful. Mortals can contemplate them and bless them. As it is written, blah, 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 blah. And Eliyahu says, no. Okay, so interesting. Like Rashbi says, wait, quiet, my son. I want to tell you something new. But that happened to him too, right? Rashbi also was quieted, also was intervened with, also had something new revealed to him. And the question of wisdom is, will you be quiet? The question of wisdom is, will you see that there's something always ready to be known? So he replied, Eliyahu says, Rabbi, a word was concealed before the Holy Blessed One, but it was revealed in the heavenly Mativta, in the yeshiva above. And here it is. Here's what God's learning in heaven. When the concealed of all concealed wanted to be revealed, and here I just want, close your eyes, just let the words, simmer. It made first a single point, which arose to become consciousness. It engraved within it all engravings, carved in it all inscriptions. It inscribed in it the holy concealed spark, the Butsina Kadisha, Satima, inscribed in one secret design. The Holy of Holies, a deep structure which emerged from consciousness and was called Hu. The origin of structure, existent and not existent. It is only called Hu. Desiring to reveal itself and be called with this name, it garbed itself in a precious radiant garment and created these. And these, Ele, attained the name. Their letters united, these and those. and the name was complete. Ayla and me. And if you put the words Ayla and me together, what word is made?
Elohim.
Got it in one. Remember how I said before, this is not just the birth of the world, this is not just the birth of your psyche, this is not just the birth of you, this is the birth of God. It's only when Ayla and me are united, or when me creates Ayla, that Elohim comes into existence. Before these were created, the word Elohim could not exist. Those who sinned at the golden calf perverted this secret and said, these are your gods. Eila Elohecha Yisrael. But when me is combined with Eila, then it is a name of constant partnering. The world endures only by this secret, which is, if you've emailed me, you know that's my tagline in my emails. This is not, so we have an overarching metaphor in the Zohar that everything is growing. You're growing, the world is growing, you are growing into the world, and the world is growing into you. You are dancing with the world as you both develop. You were born from a womb, but in a sense, you're still gestating in the womb of the world. You are still growing. You are still nourished by it, and it is nourished by you. But that growth, that birth into consciousness is also enacted by God. That as you grow, God grows. That God can only happen when who and these are united. I'm going to leave this as our last cliffhanger, because we're going to go back and we're going to look at this paragraph in real depth. Real depth. Because this is a deeply, I'm going to use the word mythological paragraph, but by that I don't mean it's fake. I don't mean myth by fake. I mean myth in the sense that it is using a story to tell us something beyond stories. It's using language to tell us something beyond language, which is all of language. All of language is this myth. It is the emergence into existence of something beyond existence. And the story that it's telling about it and the metaphors that it uses are essential. And that will then launch us into the last text from the Zohar, which we'll look at together at the conclusion of this course next week, in which we look at actually how the Zohar is drawing on ideas of love and even desire to help us understand what it is that, in a sense, is the strong gravity force that holds everything together, the force of attraction between all things, like gravity between hearts and souls, in a sense, is the same thing of the gravity between planets. That class next week will not be recorded because it uses mature, sensitive metaphors that I want to make sure we have a safe space in which we can explore. And also, so we make sure that we can think about them fully and we can take some risks and we don't need to worry about anyone peeking in. So I just want to say thank you to everybody on the YouTube, on the tubes. Please stay tuned for the bonus class that will go out Sunday or Monday. Please feel free to tune in IRL in real time with the same link, and we'll get really into depth in this incredible passage. But it is the secret of secrets, Satima Dekol Satimim. And because of that, will not be published. It will not be broadcast, but we will be investigating, questioning the secrets together in appropriately secret conditions. As we actually, I think there's something very important and very special about privacy that generates intimacy when it comes to learning Zohar, especially. So I want to try to, in as much as we can through Zoom, try to replicate actually a very essential aspect of what it means to learn Zohar, which is to create actually a private and intimate space between us. So think about what kind of, we've actually talked about conditions and experience and the like before in Kabbalah. So think about what you need to create a condition for you at your home candles, certain plants, whatever you need actually to be able to tune into something. I want to try to experiment a little bit, to use some bodily experimentation to get just out of theory and try to experiment in terms of what learning Zohar is like in the world between us. So you have some control, you can experiment in that regard yourselves. Thanks so much for joining. Thank you so much for really the amazing page that was happening in the chat. And thank you for the wonderful questions that were being asked. I'm excited to keep on exploring this text with you next week and to then go into further. And it's not the end of learning. Well, also please email me ideas about future classes. I think we had one about Agadata, about Midrash, that I think that's going to be the next one we do, maybe major stories from the Talmud. Let's see, Torah Parsha class is Thursday evening at 7:30. I think everything is just going to be at 7:30 from now on. Parsha class at 7:30. Kabbalah Shabbos at 5:15. Havdalah at 7:15 on Saturday night. Please tune in, zoom in for whatever you can. It's always a pleasure to see your faces and to learn with you. Thank you all. We have one more week. One more week. We're not saying goodbye yet. We're not saying goodbye. And also, there's no end. There's always more learning. So, have a wonderful week.